Hi, everybody. How are you? I'm Anthony Marone. I'm happy to be with you today for Time to Retire Planning. Just going to give folks a few seconds to get settled in, and we'll get started. If you could, in the chat window, we're using a new platform today for our webinar. If you could, in the chat window, let me know where you're checking us out from. It's a little different than our Zoom webinars that we've done in the past. We've kind of moving on up in the world with our technology here as things go on. So on the right-hand side of the screen, you should see the chat window. Just drop me a note and let me know where you're watching from. That's also where you'll ask any questions that you may have along the way. So if you're not familiar with the way that this works, I will take questions throughout the course of the event. We'll collect them, and then at the end, I've got time for a Q&A session. So feel free to drop your location or questions at any point in the chat window. So good to see you guys. We got folks from Watertown, Baldwinsville, Manlius, East Syracuse, the city of Syracuse, North Syracuse. So Syracuse well represented. So happy to be with you. We're going to get started here. I know everybody's time is valuable. As I said at the beginning, my name is Anthony Marone from the Marone Law Firm, for those of you who may not know me. We've done a series of these webinars throughout the COVID pandemic. And one recurring theme that I've heard from a lot of clients and a lot of just folks in the community is that the pandemic has changed people's outlook as it relates to retirement. An interesting story is that a few months back, my own mother said to me, you know, I'm thinking about retiring. I really don't want to go back to physical work in this environment. I'm close to retirement age. Is it feasible? Could I retire now? And we sat down and went through some of the things that we're going to talk about today and figured out that she, you know, in fact, she didn't need to continue working. She was in a position where she could retire. So the idea for this webinar series, a lot of people have been asking about retirement, but also it kind of came up interestingly through my own family and working with my mom. So that's why we're here today. I know that the pandemic has folks feeling a bunch of different ways about retiring. Some people probably are accelerating their clock in terms of retiring because they feel at risk or they don't want to work in this environment. And then for some folks, the timeline to retire has actually been pushed back, maybe due to market forces or uncertainty in terms of their financial security. So we're going to try to kind of go through all of the different issues that you might consider while choosing to retire or if you've recently retired. So let me fire up the old slideshow here. And like I said, if you have questions along the way, feel free to drop them in the chat window and we will go through all the questions together at the end. Okay, here we are, time to retire planning. So the topics that we're going to cover today include having a plan to deliver financial security. So obviously one of the big things that folks worry about as it relates to retirement is money. Are they going to have enough assets to retire securely? Estate planning 101, how to get the basic estate planning in order, get your affairs in order, how to protect your legacy, and then we'll end by strategizing your Social Security filing. And I'm also going to throw in a little bonus in terms of some Medicare strategies as well. So we've got a lot of ground to cover in a little bit less than an hour. So I want to get right to it. So one of the main things in terms of financial security is that clients don't have a good sense of what they want to achieve in retirement. So a lot of people, particularly if they don't have a financial advisor or a financial planner, a lot of people just don't have a good sense of how much income they're going to need in retirement, how much savings they're going to need to generate that income, and then what their spending and purchase power is going to look like. Even for folks who do have a good sense of, you know, a target number or a target income in retirement years, don't necessarily know how to get there. Many of my clients, when they come to see me, they think, when I ask if they have a financial advisor or some kind of financial planner or money manager, a lot of people think that those types of roles are only for the rich and famous. But I'm here to tell you that that's simply not true. If you don't have a financial advisor in your life, I want you to reach out to me after this webinar and I will introduce you to people. You don't have to have $5 million to have a great financial planner. There's options for both where your investments pay for the help that you're receiving, or you could pay directly a fee directly to the financial advisor. But one of the things that you're going to need to figure out is, what is your target number for retirement? How much do you need in the 401k or 403b in order to retire securely? You're not going to be able to, most folks aren't going to be able to do this on their own. The one thing I think to keep in mind is that without having someone who's a professional, just like you would get you would go to a professional doctor, or you would go to a professional attorney if you're doing your estate plan, or a CPA if you're preparing your taxes. Having a financial planner who is a professional will greatly assist you in terms of getting to where you need to be in retirement, and then making sure that your assets and your income stay where you need them to be. I'm not here to plug any particular financial advisor. I like to work as a team. So I work with a number of financial advisors in central New York and throughout New York State. I think having that person is going to greatly position you to maximize your retirement years. Another thing that we want to make sure of in terms of organizational, for your finances, is you want to make sure that we've got beneficiary designations on all of your retirement and life insurance products. So if you've got an old life insurance policy, maybe before you had kids, that may have named a sibling or a parent of yours as beneficiary, you want to go through and make sure that you've updated those beneficiary designations to reflect who you want to get that money when you pass away. One of the things that we spend a lot of time with clients on is kind of reviewing all of this information, reviewing where their assets are located, what the beneficiary designations are. As an estate planning attorney, I'm not going to sell you any investments. That's not our role. What we are going to do is work with your financial planner, or introduce you to a financial planner who's going to help you get where you need to be. So one of the first steps to having that security in retirement is, in addition to working with someone like myself, is we're going to team up with a financial expert. It's not going to cost you an arm and a leg. Their fees are very reasonable. A lot of times the fees can be paid from your investments, or you could select an advisor where you pay a fixed fee, transparent fee directly to them. There's great folks in Syracuse and throughout upstate New York who will help you along this path. One of the things that we continuously bump up against, even if I have folks that are well positioned with a financial planner, is just a general lack of organization in their financial life. They may have a bunch of assets with a particular financial advisor, but then they've got stuff that's at the bank. They've got maybe some safety deposit boxes. Their important paperwork is all over the place. And we've struggled for a long time. I've struggled for a long time because I want clients to be very organized and everything to be seamless. But we've really struggled without having something that we can point to say to clients, this is what you need to do to help get organized a little bit better. So one of the things that I'm really excited about that we've developed recently here, which kind of is right up my alley, because I love planners, and I love that feeling that you get when you're organized, is a brand new product offering. We've never had a standalone product before. Obviously, we provide services. I do a lot of estate planning and trust planning, but we've never had a specific standalone product that you can purchase from us before. So now we're very excited to introduce what we're calling Record Keeper, powered by the Marone Law Firm, which is going to be a PDF downloadable that you can fill out on your own. and it's going to store all of your key information in one place. Your personal information, your financial information, where your important papers are located. The idea is that this tool becomes the roadmap or the blueprint for your family to follow so that they can assist you as you either get on in years or if you pass away. When you pass away, everything is organized. I can't tell you how much time and money people waste searching for different things, whether it's a marriage certificate, someone's bank account information. I have clients come into my office every day and they say, Anthony, I just don't know where my dad did his banking. Or I know he had an annuity, but I don't know where it was. Or I know he had life insurance, but we can't find it. Taking the time now to fill out Record Keeper, which you can actually download right within this webinar, is going to greatly help your family and you be positioned for success in the future. So if you click on the Offers tab along the side, you'll see a link where you can purchase Record Keeper. You'll get a downloadable that you can either fill out on your computer, or my preference is print it out and fill it out the old-fashioned way with pen or pencil, and it will help you get organized. The great thing about Record Keeper, if you purchase it, and it's available for just $19.99, if you purchase it, you're going to continue to get some videos from us over the next few weeks that are going to help you maximize the use of this instrument. So I'm really excited. It's the first ever true product that we've offered. I hope you guys will love it. I think you will. And yeah, let's keep going. There's a little screenshot of what it's just what it'll look like. And again, you could do this anytime within the webinar by clicking the Offers tab on the right-hand side of the screen. So carrying on with financial planning, in addition to getting organized, one of the kind of the next steps once you're organized is making sure that you have a strategy that's going to work. So especially if the markets are down, I mean, we had a period earlier this year where the markets really took a beating. Now we're kind of, I think, at least my opinion is, we're on borrowed time in terms of the market strength right now. But down markets are really when you're going to be determining what your comfort level is with risk, especially as folks start to retire or think about retiring. Generally, they become more risk averse. This is an area where we want to plug in that financial advisor or plug in that financial planner so that we can help and they can take over, basically adjusting your risk assessment and adjusting your investments accordingly. Risk and return do go hand in hand, though. So, you know, with great risk, there is an opportunity for strong level of reward. Minimal risk, probably opportunity for minimal growth. So, you know, as you're someone younger like me, probably not going to retire for about 30 years. I may have a greater appetite for risk in my 401k than someone my mom's age who, you know, was considering retiring and did retire this year. The trajectory for when we're going to need that money is different. Another thing that you want to focus on, especially with the financial planner, is spending. I almost without exception, when clients come and they want to do some kind of advanced planning, usually a trust, the first thing I say to them, if they're not yet retired, is there's certain things we can do, but one of the things I want to wait on is to see what your spending is like in retirement. It's hard to say when you go from that period of time where you're working to being retired, what your expenditures are going to look like. Generally, in my experience, people spend in terms of discretionary spending is much higher early in retirement than it is later. Reason for this is as you get older, you're just less likely to travel and have that discretionary spending. But I want to see the rate at which you're depleting your money. It's a calculation that we call a runway calculation, or I call a runway calculation, which is I want to know how long your money's going to last you. Once I have a good sense of this, I'm able to position somebody to make sure while working with their financial planner that the plan that we put in place is going to work for them. And I think the last thing in terms of spending and talking about money in particular is you need to focus on what you can control. You know, I have a executive coach, Mike Scrow, who a lot of you might know, who will talk often about locus of control, right? Only focusing and giving attention to those things that I can have direct impact on. There's a lot of things going on in the world that I have a lot of personal feelings about that I can't dictate the outcome of. Focus on the things that you can control, your investment choices, your spending. Those are things that are within your locus of control. What the stock market's going to do, or what the president or Congress is going to do on fiscal policy, you may have an opinion on those things, but they're outside of the realm of your direct control. Sure, we can vote, but you don't have direct influence on the stock market as an individual. So by focusing on only those things you can control, you can kind of keep yourself more even keel as you start to think about, okay, I'm going to retire. This is what it's going to look like. This is what it's going to feel like. Here's how I will move from working into retirement from a financial perspective. And then once you've got your financial house in order, primarily through working together, we'll help you work with a financial planner. The next step that you want to take is making sure that your estate planning is set up. And this is where we spend a lot of time with clients. So many people think that when I say estate planning, that's something for, again, the rich and famous. But really, this applies to every adult in New York State. Every adult is going to need what's called a healthcare proxy, someone to make medical decisions for you if you're unable to make them for yourself. Under what circumstances do you want end-of-life care? These are all the things that we'll address in a healthcare proxy. Giving someone HIPAA disclosure. We all know that privacy rules are a big deal nowadays. Giving someone HIPAA disclosure is going to give that person the authority to access your medical records. And then if you want to be an organ donor, you'd have to indicate that in your healthcare proxy. There's other ways to do it too. You can register as an organ donor in New York. The old-fashioned way is on the back of your license, but a healthcare proxy is one spot where we will indicate whether someone wants to donate their organs. Everyone also needs a power of attorney. I always say that this can be the most important document because without a great person named as power of attorney, you leave yourself vulnerable to someone taking advantage of you and taking your money. So you're appointing someone to make financial decisions and pay your bills if you're unable to do that for yourself. And the power of attorney is just a document where we talk about how much authority that person would have. Can they make gifts of your assets? What power are we giving them? And do they get paid for that work? The reason I say this is probably one of the most important documents you may have is that if you pick the wrong person to be power of attorney and they take your money, then your will or whatever you've got set up to direct where your money goes when you die won't matter, because if you die broke, it doesn't matter what it says in your will. So having a proper person selected as power of attorney is really going to be kind of the linchpin or the key to making sure that this is going to be successful and that you're going to be protected later on in life. And then the last document that I think everybody needs is going to be what we call a last will and testament, or a trust, depending on the situation. Really, the will, the last will and testament, is designed to do two things. First, it's going to determine who is going to inherit your assets when you die. Very simple. The second thing it's going to do is appoint someone we call an executor. Appoint someone who's going to be in charge of handling your affairs. When you boil it all down, that's what the will does, those two things. Now, lawyers like me will take those two decisions and make it 20 or 30 pages of jargon, just because that's what we do. And we're working in several other special provisions depending on your situation. So you may need, you may have a child that has a disability, and we've got to have special provisions for that child. Or you may have some tax issues that we need to kind of plan for. And so the document will have that kind of planning based in it. Or you may have grandkids that you want to leave some money to, and we'll address that in your will or trust as well. So at its core, it just does those two things. Who gets your stuff, who's in charge of it. Gets more complicated depending on the situation. But I think if we're talking about estate planning 101, and especially getting your affairs in order to retire, these are the three cornerstone documents that everybody needs. They're affordable. We've got affordable plans to do it. We'll talk about the cost and the discount a little bit later on. But this is the essential three things that when we talk about estate planning, this is what I'm talking about. So everybody needs it. It doesn't matter how much money or how little money you have. This will position you to move through retirement with peace of mind because you've done what you need to do to get your affairs in order. Moving right along, protecting your legacy becomes kind of the next step. So once you've done the basics, and we will do all of this kind of simultaneously, but once you've done the basics of estate planning, the next step is, okay, let's think 20 years down the road. I'm 65 now, but what is this going to look like when I'm 85? I want to make sure that the legacy that I've worked to create for my family is going to be protected. I don't want it to be exposed to the costs of things like long-term care. Well, what does that mean? Long-term care is just this generic catch-all term that we use to refer to a number of levels of care for the elderly. It can mean care in your own home, independent living, assisted living, all the way up to a nursing home. So it's a wide range of types and levels of care that we're referring to when we say long-term care. So one of the things to kind of think about, and this is probably a good point to say, that you are going to get a copy of this slideshow by email. So if you've registered and you're on this webinar, don't feel as though you need to commit all of these things to memory. You're going to receive an email from me which has a copy of the slideshow. In it will also have a recording of the webinar. This is an interesting graphic from seniorliving.org where it really talks about, from on the bottom half here, level of care and supervision. So as you move from left to right, the level of care and supervision goes up. So at the basic, we have adult daycare, which is really similar to like a PACE program that Loretto runs. Also maybe a Silver Fox, which is more of a senior type social gathering. That's going to be a low level of care, low level of supervision, and also low cost. As you move from left to right, the level of care and supervision goes up. So you'll see a big, I'll call it orange, arc here for in-home care. This is what most people, if we're talking about long-term care, that's what most people want to have happen. Like if I need care, I want it to be in my own home. I don't want to have to go to a hospital or go to a facility in order to get that care. So you'll see there's a wide range of levels of care and supervision. You can have very basic, what we call companion care, which is just not really medical in nature, and spanning all the way to the high end, which is going to be like a skilled nurse in your home. As you move from simple to complex, the cost is going to go up. And you'll see there's a bunch of other little options along the way here. The higher you go, the higher the cost. So nursing home, kind of at the top right-hand corner here, is one of the highest levels of care and probably the highest cost. The only other maybe higher level of care is going to be an end of life or hospice. But for most people, we're trying to navigate between care in their house, care in an assisted living facility, and then maybe care in a nursing home if necessary. So those are kind of the three big areas that we spend a lot of time planning around. And again, you'll get this graphic in the slideshow. But how do we pay for this? So especially if we are worried about, protecting our legacy and making sure we don't run out of money, we want to know, how can we pay for this care if we need it? Well, there's good news and bad news. The good news is there's some government help. So Medicare, which we're going to talk about at the end, Medicare, which is your health insurance if you're 65 and up, they pay about 10% of the cost. This is mostly limited to nursing home rehabilitation stay. So if you go from a hospital to a nursing home for rehab, Medicare will generally cover about 3 months of that stay. So it doesn't include things like long-term care in a nursing home or assisted living or care in your own home. Medicaid, which we're going to talk a little bit more. Medicaid is the federal and state program that subsidizes the cost for most nursing home care in the United States. So for most people who are in a nursing home, Medicaid becomes the payer of that care. Out of pocket, you'll see, is about half. So especially when we're talking about care in your own home or care in an assisted living facility, that's mostly private pay, which means you get a bill from the provider and you're writing a check for it. So obviously, when we're talking about retirement, I've got to know how much savings you've got, how much income you've got, and then I can give you some projections for how long that you could pay for these things for. That's what we call our runway calculation. How long is my money going to last? Private insurance will pay 3%. Now, just one little note here, we're not talking about private health insurance. So a lot of us have private health insurance through our employer or for retirement. Generally doesn't pay for long-term care. Private insurance refers in this context to what's called long-term care insurance, which is something you would buy separate from your health insurance to provide some kind of benefit in this area. So long-term care insurance is usually going to provide some benefits to help you pay for care in your own home or care in an assisted living facility or care in a nursing home. But you'll see that makes up only 3% of the payment sources. So by far, the great majority is a combination of out-of-pocket and Medicaid. And we're going to talk a little bit more about nursing homes and Medicaid and how that all works. A big thing to keep in mind here, especially if you're considering retiring now, is that inflation has a huge impact, especially in the baby boom generation, which are the folks that are starting to retire. Inflation has a huge impact on the cost of care. So this chart was made in 2005, actually. So I grabbed this from 2005. In 2005, the average daily cost was $270. Based on inflation being compounded at 5%, which is probably a little aggressive because we had the recession in 2008, but they projected that the daily cost for nursing home care would be about $440 a day. And I could tell you that's basically correct in some of the better nursing homes in central New York, the higher rated facilities. We're at about $400, $450 a day in 2020. Well, they projected that by 2025, the average nursing home cost would be $716 a day. That's in excess of $20K a month, which is crazy to think about, especially with some of the stuff that we've been reading about nursing homes during this pandemic, but probably not too far off. This was produced in 2005. I think that depending on what happens here in the next year or so, we're probably going to be at about $650 to $700 in the next 5 years for average costs in a nursing home. So a lot of my clients are trying to figure out, how do I avoid that? How do I protect what I've got, keep what I've got, and avoid having to pay that $400, $500, $600 a day in a nursing home? So this is where this is what I call have your cake and eat it too. So with proper planning, well in advance of needing this long-term care, so before you need it, having some planning in place is going to protect your assets. It's going to protect your retirement assets so that you won't have to go broke paying for this care. The rules for long-term care and protecting your assets have changed dramatically this year. So during the budget, we had a budget that was passed in April in the midst of the beginnings of the coronavirus pandemic. And in New York State, one of the issues at the time, and it's probably gotten worse, is that we were projecting a huge budget deficit because of revenue loss. So one of the areas where the government wanted and has wanted for some time to cut back is long-term care. It's so expensive for the state and the counties to subsidize the cost of Medicaid and long-term care. So for a while, what we had in New York was that you could actually get on what was called community-based Medicaid, which is a subsidy where you can access benefits either in your home or in an assisted living facility that takes Medicaid. And actually, you could plan and hide or shelter your assets and then access Medicaid the very next month. So there was no what we call look back period. There was no waiting period where if you gave away assets, you had to wait before Medicaid would help you pay for assisted living or care in your home. Now, effective, really taking effect in October, but potentially going to be slid back to January, depending on negotiations with the Department of Health. There is now a look back period of 30 months, which is, I always say I went to law school, not math school, so 2.5 years, which means if you need community Medicaid, which a lot of people in Syracuse are accessing PACE, which is a community Medicaid program, you have got to do trust planning and asset protection planning 2.5 years before you need it. So gone are the days where we'll be able to do this planning. Let's say we do it in September, and then the client can access that program in October. That's not going to work anymore. There's going to be a 2.5 year look back for those types of programs. For a long time, there's been a 5-year look back for nursing homes. So a lot of folks know if they have to do planning for nursing homes, you've got to do that 5 years before you need it. Well, now for care in your own home or care in the community, we're talking 2.5 years of a look back period. So we're going to talk in a second about what we can do. The time is really now to take action because, it's getting more and more expensive, as we saw, to provide this care. And as the state runs out of financial resources to help subsidize it, it's going to be more incumbent on us to do this planning in advance and help protect our assets in advance. So really what you do to position yourself to maintain control of your assets, but also protect them so they don't get liquidated to pay for all of your long-term care, is use what we call the Family Protection Trust. So this is a trust that we create, sometimes called a Medicaid qualifying trust, to take ownership of your assets. It's irrevocable, might sound scary, but actually we can change it if we need to. What this gets you is, even though you can maintain control of your assets, by putting them into this trust, if you make the look back period, which again is 2.5 years for assisted living or 5 years for nursing home, but if you clear that look back period, you could have $1 million in the trust, and the government cannot make you liquidate those assets to pay for your long-term care. It doesn't mean it's going to be free. It's not going to be free. You will still have a copay depending on your income. So it's certainly not free. But rather than having to privately pay until you're broke and spending all of your nest egg and your legacy on long-term care, this allows you to preserve your savings, but also position you so that if you need long-term care, you can qualify without going broke. Like I said, it can be changed if necessary. So even though it's irrevocable, it's not as if there's no loopholes. Like anything else with lawyers, of course, there's a loophole. This is the primary tool that we use for our clients to position them to have their cake and eat it too. So most people want to stay in control of their assets. They like, looking at their stock portfolio and talking to their broker or financial planner about trades. They like being able to sell their house without their kids being involved. The trust allows you to do that. It puts you in a really strong position in terms of control, but it does just enough so that from the government's perspective, we will qualify for Medicaid if we need it and minimize the amount of out-of-pocket expenditure. It's not free. You'll still have some copay. You still have skin in the game with Medicaid. So it's not as if you're taking something for nothing. You're still paying for this. And by the way, we've all paid for Medicaid through our income taxes for years. But this allows you to minimize that outlay and still put you in a position where you can qualify for care, not go broke, and get the treatment and care that you will ultimately need. So the Family Protection Trust, which is what we call it, becomes the primary vehicle to not only deal with your estate, but protect your assets from invasion from creditors, so that the nursing home or the government can't make you spend all of your money in order to pay for your long-term care. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat screen, and we'll come back to that during the Q&A session. So a lot of folks ask, well, what's the difference between that family protection trust and a regular revocable trust? A revocable trust is only a substitute for your last will and testament. So a revocable trust is only going to stand in place of your will. It doesn't do anything to protect your assets from nursing home or long-term care expenses. So there are a lot of attorneys that make a lot of money selling people revocable trusts that do nothing to protect them from nursing home or long-term care. Additionally, one of the troubles with a revocable trust is that you have to make sure you put all of your assets into it. You have to change title on all of those assets if you want to avoid probate. So it's a lot of work to get everything retitled, all your bank accounts, all your real estate, to get it all retitled to avoid probate. The irrevocable trust, which is what we're calling the family protection trust, is going to give you asset protection, right? Protection from those long-term care expenses. You stay in control, so you're not giving up control. And it also gets us a way to pass assets outside of probate. You know, people read in the newspaper or they hear about probate and they think it's scary and hard and expensive. Most of the time it's not, but the irrevocable trust will also give us a way to pass assets outside of probate if we need to. So this is just a little simple breakdown between, if you hear someone saying, oh, I've got a revocable trust, it's great. Well, it's great if all you're trying to do is avoid probate. But if you're worried about exposing your assets to the cost of long-term care, revocable does nothing to help you. You want an irrevocable trust. We call it family protection trust just because that's what it does. But this is just a simple breakdown of these two types of trusts. We get this question a lot because a lot of people they get these things in the mail. They go to these in-person seminars back when we could do this, and they fork over a ton of money for a thick binder of paper that actually doesn't do anything to protect them if they have long-term care costs. The family protection trust or an irrevocable trust is by far the better way to go if you're concerned about long-term care. Another question we get all the time is, can I just give my house to my kids? You know, that's for a lot of us, the home or the real estate is kind of the primary or one of the primary assets. And you could go to any lawyer in town and they'll do a deed giving your house to your kids. Well, this is what we call the life estate cliff. Beware of the life estate cliff. One of the things about giving your house to your kids is that in order for you to keep things like your star credit, you have to keep what's called life use or life estate. That keeps you in control. Now, there are significant issues if one of your kids passes away before you, or gets disabled, or gets divorced, and you've got this life estate deed with your kids on it as well. I've had the case more than once where the child predeceases the parent, and now that child's share of mom or dad's house belongs to their spouse, and the spouse wants to get their money. So, you know, life estate deed is all well and good. Most lawyers will do it, but without thinking through all of the possibilities, you could be walking into a trap by not kind of planning in advance for what happens if there's death or disability or divorce. Another issue that we commonly see with the life estate deed is, well, what happens if you sell it while mom or dad is alive? Technically, legally, what has to happen is mom and dad gets a percentage of that sale, and then the kids get a percentage. And those percentages depend on how old mom and dad are when the sale happens. So the IRS has what we call actuarial tables that tell you, based on mom or dad's age, legally they get, let's say, 40%, and the kids get 60%. Well, the one problem there is maybe mom and dad don't want the kids to get 60%. They may want to, keep all that money for themselves. The bigger issue is the kids, because it's not their primary residence, if it's sold while mom and dad are alive, the kids may have capital gains tax consequences, depending on the situation. So I don't love the life estate for all of these reasons. I just think it's overly simplistic and it doesn't give us enough flexibility. We put the house and all real estate into the Family Protection Trust. It allows us to plan around all these things I've talked about, gives us more control, gives the client more control. God forbid a child dies before then, we can adjust the trust. If there's a sale during lifetime, we don't have these tricky capital gains tax issues. It just puts us in a much better position to ultimately pass the house to the kids when the parents want to, which is typically when they pass away, without all of the difficulty or complication of these things that we just chatted about. So beware those that tell you to just deed your house to your kids. I don't love that as a strategy. It's just too fraught with potential problem. I'm going to take a quick H2O break here. Just probably a great time to remind you that if you click over to the offers tab, the record keeper is still available. If you want to take a second to do that now, or click the link, it should open in a new tab. You can go back to it after the webinar, so it won't take you away from the webinar itself. And that will remain open and available throughout the course of this event. Moving right along, we've got probably a great time to just talk about planning. So if you want to do estate planning with our office, if you haven't already, and I know a lot of my clients on this webinar, we've already done your planning. So feel free to grab a drink of coffee or a water. If you haven't done planning, we are going to extend a special discount to people who have taken their time to watch the webinar today. So if you go to the site that we designed, thewillbuilder.com, and use promo code RETIRE, you're going to receive 20% off whatever plan you need. So any estate planning services with this promo code through thewillbuilder.com, which is our personal website that we designed, that's going to get you started to doing estate planning. And this will all, again, go out in an email to you after the event. But as a thank you for taking your time, I know time is valuable now, for taking your time out of your busy schedule to join in. If you need estate planning services, we're offering a promotional discount. So thank you so much for joining. Let's get back to the good stuff. I want to cover, just in the minutes we have left, Social Security and Medicare. So this is there's actually a great book if you want to go to the library or the bookstore. Probably the bookstore, because it's been updated several times. As Social Security changes, Social Security is probably one of the most complicated benefit systems that's out there. It's called an entitlement, but really it's not. You've paid into Social Security for most of your working life. The first thing we want to know when I'm helping someone, especially if they're looking at Social Security, is what's that full retirement age? It used to be 65. That's no longer the case. So if you're like, my parents were born in the late 50s, depending on the year of your birth, that's going to tell you your full retirement age. And that kind of sets the table for what your level of benefits can be. So I'd highly recommend the book, Get What's Yours, The Revised Secrets to Maxing Out Your Social Security. I think it's a great, accessible book. There's not a lot of jargon in it, and it's going to walk you through your particular circumstance and kind of walk you through what you need to do with Social Security. But here's my tips. You can start to draw Social Security as young as age 62. So when you hit 62, you're eligible to draw, but your benefit will be greater if you wait until your full retirement age. So going back, if I was born in 1957, my full retirement age is 66 years and 6 months. So what that means is I can start drawing at 62, which if I was born in, I'm gonna make myself do math. If I was born in 1957, that would have been last year, 2019. But if I wait until I'm 66 years and 6 months, which will probably be 2023, I think, that's my full retirement age. But then I can keep working, and actually my benefit for Social Security will not max out until I hit age 70, which will be 2027. So it's going to increase about 8% annually up to age 70. So if you're still working or you don't need to draw Social Security, you're going to get a bigger benefit by waiting to start to take Social Security until you hit age 70. After 70, there's no change, so there's no reason to wait. You want to take it by 70 at the latest. You can also continue to work and draw benefits if you're under your full retirement age. So if I was born in 1957 and I'm under 66 years and 6 months, I'm going to be capped in terms of what I can work, how much money I can earn. And it's a sliding scale, but I'm going to be capped in terms of how much I can work and still draw my Social Security. So you want to time this correctly. I'm happy to go through and kind of customize it with you to figure out what's the appropriate time. And there's all kinds of calculators that are available that do the different algorithms to maximize your benefits. But that's the general lay of the land. If you're married, you're entitled to receive either the greater of your own benefit, so the benefit that's based on your 10 best years of work, or 50% of your spouses. So we see this a lot, especially with folks where one spouse, it's less common nowadays, for folks my age, but in my parents' generation and their parents' generation, you'd have one spouse stay home with the kids, the other spouse would go to work. We didn't want to penalize the spouse who stayed home with the kids, so that person would get 50% of their spouse's benefit if they hadn't worked. If they hadn't worked outside the home, I should say. So whichever's greater. So while your spouse is living, if both spouses are living, one spouse can draw their full retirement benefit based on their work record, and their partner can draw 50% of that spouse's benefit. Rules get slightly more complicated from there if you're divorced. So if you're divorced, but you were married for at least 10 years and you're not remarried, then you could still draw on your ex-spouse's benefit. It's not going to impact them at all. A lot of people get worried. It's usually the person whose benefit they're going to be drawing from. They get worried that would somehow impact their personal benefit. It won't. If your ex, legally divorced, but you were married for at least 10 years, then you can draw on either your own personal benefit record, which is based on your work history and salary, or your ex-spouses, one half of your ex-spouses. If you are a widow or widower, you're eligible to collect either the greater of your own benefit or 100% of your spouse's benefit. So the way we see this play out is I may have a husband and wife where the husband's collecting off his own record. Let's say it's $2,000 a month, and the spouse is collecting 50% because she may not have worked outside the house. So she's collecting $1,000 a month, right? So between the two of them, they have $3,000. Then the husband dies. His benefit goes away, but the spouse is actually, instead of continuing to receive her $1,000 a month, she's going to start to collect the husband's benefit of $2,000 a month. So the net effect is that they had joint income of $3,000 from Social Security. Husband dies, that does go down to $2,000. Her personal benefit goes up. It gets a little tricky, but even if one spouse dies, the survivor or the widow is eligible to collect either the greater of their own benefit or whatever the 100% of the spouse's benefit was. And these are just the basic rules. So Social Security is a fickle government program being made slightly more complicated by everything that's happening in Washington right now with the deferral of the Social Security tax system. So hopefully, especially for folks my age, we're paying into Social Security, kind of hoping that the program's still going to be funded at the time that we retire. No guarantee of that, obviously. But for folks who are considering retiring now, I think having a working understanding of these rules is going to put you in a better position to maximize the benefits, especially if you're married. There's three big pointers, three big kind of wrap up points on Social Security. Don't assume you know all the benefits. As painful though it may be to call Social Security and wait or go there when that's okay again, you may have a unique situation where there's benefits that you don't even know about. Another thing I always say is ask and ye shall receive. Social Security doesn't know about your family. They don't know about your husband or wife, your partner. They don't know your marital situation. You've got to tell them in order for them to calculate what the payouts are going to be. So don't assume when you go to ssa.gov and you log in that you're getting your maximum benefit without talking to somebody. And the big thing in Social Security, any planning involving Social Security, is that patience is rewarded. The longer you wait to draw, up to 70, the higher the benefit's going to be. Obviously, that takes you're taking some risk because you may die sooner and not be able to make that money back, or get disabled and not be able to enjoy. So there's certain assumptions that you're making and risk that you're taking on by waiting, but generally that patience is rewarded. That's Social Security. I know it wasn't in the agenda, but I want to just cover what I call the ABC and Ds of Medicare. Medicare comes up all the time. There's so much misinformation about it. Seniors get so much mail about it. I just want to try to make it simple and break it down. I'm going to make myself a little smaller. There are 4 parts to Medicare, not including supplements. It was created in 1965, and it's now used by about 55 million Americans, 45 million folks who are retired, which means you're over 65, and then 10 million disabled Americans. So what you may not know is if you get Social Security disability, if you're approved for that, even if you're my age, 37, 24 months after you're approved for Social Security disability, you're automatically going to be enrolled in Medicare. So we've got 10 million of those disabled Americans on Medicare as well. Parts A and B are referred to as original or basic Medicare. Part A covers hospital stays. Part B covers doctors, outpatient, medical supplies. The Part B premium in 2020 is $144.60. For most people, if you're collecting Social Security, this is auto-debited from your payment under Social Security. So you don't have to, most people aren't writing a check. Unless they're not collecting Social Security, this premium's auto-paid. Part C is what we call Medicare Advantage plans. That's an alternative to A and B. So you can actually buy a plan that would be an alternative to just the standard basic A and B. And then Part D, many people know that's prescription drug coverage. So when you're first eligible for Medicare, you're going to have an initial 7-month enrollment period to sign up for A and B. So you want to do this before you turn 65. Don't wait until you're 65. You have 3 months before you can start to enroll. I highly advise folks to do it then. You don't want to wait until that last month. So it's basically the 7-month period starts 3 months before your birthday, includes the month of your birthday, and then goes another 3 months after your birthday. So you've got this 7-month initial eligibility window to sign up. I encourage people to do that sooner rather than later. That allows you to explore all the options. And then the ABC and Ds of Medicare, just kind of the last point here, is that if you wait until the month you turn 65, your Part B coverage could be delayed, which causes a gap. And then if you don't sign up for Part B when you're first eligible, you'll have a penalty. So don't miss signing up for Part B. Even if you're still working, get with someone. And if you don't have someone, let me know. There's some really good Medicare people in this community who can help you kind of walk through, that will help you kind of walk through your options as they relate to Medicare. And so now we're going to move into the question and answer session. If you've got any questions, feel free to put them in the chat window. We'll cover any Q&A that you may have just in a second. So feel free to pop in your question now. And while I wait for the questions to come in, one last plug for Record Keeper. I'm super excited about it. I've wanted to have a physical product for a long time. I love my planner. I take it with me everywhere I go. My wife and I are filling this out. This is literally hot off the presses for us. We're filling this out now so that we have it in place, because I didn't have all my financial information all in one place either before we developed this product. So I think you don't have to be considering retirement to do this. I think once you've got a 401k or you've got a bank account and you're an adult, this is something that you want to put together and then update over time. So we're super excited about it. You can get back to it by clicking the offers tab. You can also go to www.themaronelawfirm.com/recordkeeper. That's the website where you can then look at it, buy it if you want to, see more information about the tool. But www.themaronelawfirm.com/recordkeeper will take you to the page. We've got a couple questions coming in. One is, does disability, Social Security, which so I call that's SSD, affect how much you get later? It's a good question. Usually not. So you can start to draw SSD when you're 40, and it's not going to reduce your retirement payment. Now you cannot collect both. So you can't collect Social Security, disability, and your traditional retirement benefit as an individual. You're going to collect the greater of the two, but it's not going to reduce your ability or your payout rather if you collect Social Security, disability when you're 50 versus just collecting Social Security when you're at your full retirement age or 62 and up. That's a great question. And Social Security, in my opinion, like if we're talking about all of the different topics we've covered today, which is a ton of ground, Social Security probably the most difficult, at least for me. And I do this every day. It's just there's so many little wacky one-off rules. I always get on the phone with somebody from Social Security to kind of march through these options and choices with folks, and find that sometimes even they don't necessarily know all the rules. I'll lean heavily on the published books from the experts who deal just with Social Security, because for me it's kind of a topic that impacts everything, but it's not something that I spend 8 hours every day doing. I'm doing all these other things that we talked about too. So I try to lean on experts there if I can as well. Another question is, where does the retirement analysis occur in your process? This is a great question. Especially if I'm working with someone who's thinking about retiring, I want it to occur as soon as possible when they're thinking about it. For me personally, in my process, I'm looking at it not constantly, but I'd say on an annual basis, having a check-in with my financial advisor, based on my current expenses, projecting out retirement age, am I on track or not? Nowadays, most major financial companies have tools to kind of set this all up for the advisor so that it's not a guessing game. You plug in what income you want in retirement, and it's going to tell you what that 401k balance needs to be to get there. And then it's got an algorithm to tell you if you're on track. I would say this is an ongoing analysis in my world. But when clients come to see me, certainly we want to do it at that point. If they're thinking about retirement, we want to connect them to an advisor to do these projections, because even if they're thinking about it and trying to plan for 3-4 years in the future, it may be too late to accumulate a ton more savings, but we want to make sure that they're going to be on track for where they want to go. So I'd say we're doing it or encouraging it with many people, especially if they're asking about retirement. Now, if I have a young couple that comes in and they've just had a baby, I'm not talking to them about retirement planning, but I am talking to them about financial planning. And that's where looping the financial advisor in becomes imperative, because that's going to put them on a better road to success in the future. Retirement may be 40 years away for those people, but you don't want to wait until you're at the 65 to start planning for it. We know that 6 to 7 out of 10 Americans aren't appropriately prepared for retirement from a financial perspective. So the sooner the better to get them in front of an expert on the money side of things. I do the planning and the documents and kind of setting up all the legal structures. We rely heavily on the financial advisor or financial planner to deal with money management, investments. I'm not going to tell you what stock to buy, but I'm going to get you to the person who will help you with that. We have a question about the cost of the Family Protection Trust. It's a good question. If you go to thewillbuilder.com, we're very transparent about all of our pricing. We've got 4 different plans. I'd encourage you to go to thewillbuilder.com and you can see the price for each plan. I'll say for each of the For each of the planning options, we offer payments, so you don't have to pay everything in one shot. We are flexible. We take credit card. You can send us a check the old-fashioned way, but all of the pricing is visible and very transparent on thewillbuilder.com. That's a great question. So I think we are at a point where I don't see any more questions. You can always email me at anthony@themaronelawfirm.com if you want to ask any further questions. I want to thank you for joining me today. Again, don't forget to grab Record Keeper, available at www.themaronelawfirm.com and /Record Keeper. And thanks, everybody. Take care.